Let me ask you a question. What's the first thought that goes through your mind when the police rolls up on you?
Where you running, huh?
Yeah, slow down, please.
I hope I don't get a ticket.
I hope that I make it home alive.
Quite frankly, I was in fear for my life. The suspect was non-compliant with our orders and was just obstructing our investigation.
So sick people going to funerals.
The Civil Rights Act only resulted because of a nation of African Americans coming together and taking a stand.
You people think it's okay to break the law.
Where these motherfuckers at? Where they at?
Oh, shoot like the police.
I don't give a
Like Rosa Parks refused to go to the back of the bus? That was considered breaking the law. So apparently you gotta break the law to do what's right.
I mean, this city is like a warless prison. You know what I'm saying? The same people that say they gonna protect you, those usually be the one that kill you.
This is America.
This is America, where I would love to walk freely, he would love to run freely, and I'm sure he would love to drive freely. But that isn't the case. Here, it's just a fight to breathe.
Give a about no police, man. You scared? Huh? What's up? You scared? I'll take you to church.
Ken Williams, congratulations on Asbury Park and welcome to American Black Journal.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, as I say in the open for this, those of us who are from Detroit or live in the area know that Asbury Park is a street on the west side. Is now the title of your film, but it's also where you're from. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I grew up on Asbury Park Street, right off 7 Mile.
So talk about the inspiration for this film, the street that you grew up on, the experiences that you had there.
The film is a coming of age story about 4 boys growing up in the inner city and their dreams to just, have better lives. It reflects on each of their individual homes where everyone has their own set of issues, but as a group, they all come together and, like I said, they try to make it out. But the biggest thing behind this film is survival. Mm-hmm. Like I said, each of the kids, they have their own different things that they're going through and dealing with. And I thought it would be interesting to see this from kids' perspective. There are so many things that are going on in the world right now with police brutality, mental health awareness, just a lot of different things. And as adults, we have a hard time grasping our heads around it and dealing with it. So to be able to see this from a kid's perspective, I think is necessary. Yeah. Because I'm a parent and I know, as I watch the news and see the things that are going on, I know how I'm trying to deal with it and gravitate to it. And I think just as a community, we just have to do a better job of, actually checking to see what's going on with our kids, to see how they're dealing with it, to see what they think about it. Because I think if we did that, I think we'll really be blown away by some of the responses that we get, because they're not stupid. They see what's going on. And they're more conscious of what's going on than we're probably aware of.
Yeah. So talk about the differences between what maybe you experienced as a kid growing up in that area and what your characters in the movie experience. Is there a big difference, or
to be honest, it's a direct reflection of what I experienced as a kid. Like, I grew up in a single parent home. My father left when I was 6 years old, and when that happened, I was no longer able to be a 6-year-old. I had to start moving. I always, the running joke is when I was 6, I was actually 16, because the level of responsibility, shifted. And I was no longer able to be a carefree kid to just sit back and say, hey, everything is okay. With no man in the house, I took it upon myself to be the man in the house. Now, my mother will argue that, and she'll say, hey, there's no man in the house. But, you know, despite what she said, I was the biggest male in the house. You know, so there were certain things that I did to try to protect the house. You know, I was the kid who I'll pull out the toolbox and something needs to get fixed. You know, I'm doing that now. I'm checking the windows at night and looking out to make sure, you know, that my mom is protected and things like that. So I took on a much older persona than I actually was due to my circumstances. And the reality is that's not uncommon. You know, like, I think one of my biggest motivations behind this film is my youngest son. I looked at him one day and I laughed and I was like, man, you're like really a 10-year-old. Because when I was 10, I had responsibilities. I had, you know what I mean? It was just a totally different animal. And to see him just be carefree, I wasn't able to be carefree as a kid. You know, I grew up in an environment where I heard gunshots at night. And I knew if you called 911, the police may not show up, 50-50 chance. And so again, these were the things that were on my mind at 10, 11 years old. Well, if somebody comes in here, then how do I function? How do I protect my mom? How do I protect my brother? My 10-year-old doesn't think about stuff like this, because we call 911, they'll be here in 2 minutes.
Right. So I wonder what message you think people who aren't from Detroit and who may not know anything about Asbury Park, the street, might take away from this. film. I'm always curious about how we project to everybody else from the city.
Well, you know what? One of my goals for this film was for it to serve as a window to the inner city, to give a real look to what it's about. And as you watch the film, you'll notice that it's very detail oriented, because I feel like those small details are really big. I watch urban cinema regularly, and the drug dealing and the shooting, like, yeah, that happens. But I feel like this portion of it is often missed. Everybody is often, you know, trying to be tough and things like this. But what's often missed in those films is the vulnerability. You know, to understand that people hurt or people are afraid. You know, I don't care who you are. You know, I know some tough guys who cry. You know, why? Because they're hurt, because someone passed or something happened. So to be able to show these raw emotions, I think is really big and again, really important.
Yeah. Talk about the medium of film to convey these messages. Why is that the medium you chose, and how powerful does it feel to you?
I grew up as a film lover, so, you know, movies have been my life since I was, you know, for as long as I can remember. But one of the things that I noticed, like, just growing up and being observant, is that we constantly throughout our lives, we reference film. You know, if someone gets beat up, people automatically reference Friday. You know, you got knocked out. You know what I mean? So film has been, just like music, has been very influential, you know, throughout our lives, whether we're conscious of it or not. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, given my passion for film, it was, you know, it was a no-brainer for me for that to be my medium.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what's next? Are you going to tell more Detroit stories? Do you want to tell more Detroit stories through film?
Well, that's the thing. Like, Asbury Park isn't even necessarily a Detroit story. Right. It actually takes place in the fictitious world of the inner city. Yeah. You know, because while it is relevant in Detroit, it's also relevant in Baltimore and St. Louis and, you know, just all over the country. And I think that's one of those things that propelled me to write the story. I was listening to an interview of Meek Mill, and he was talking about the way he grew up in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And I'm listening and I'm like, that sounds real familiar. And honestly, my goal and my hope is that people that are not from that environment will take a look and start asking questions, because I feel like that's how you evoke change. You know, there are several people who would be willing to lend a hand and be willing to help if they knew there was actually a problem. You know, some things like I spoke with someone and we were talking about police response times. People in the inner city, they know that, you know, but when I was trying to explain that to some of my team members who grew up in more suburban environments, they didn't think it was real. Hey, it could take an hour before the police get there if they show up at all. They're like, what? What do you mean?
Yeah, it surprises people. It shocks people.
Yeah, you know, but again, oftentimes when people hear about inner city stories, they're hearing about it on the news, in rap videos, or in these bang bang shooting up films. So hopefully this will give people the opportunity to actually see it in another light